The Tokyo Ghoul manga is absolutely beautiful. Just the manga. I already have quite the extensive list of manga under my belt for being a relative newcomer to this side of the weeb field, so I thought I was finally ready to dip my toes into some non-shonen series. And boy, I chose quite the doozy to start. So, I started Tokyo Ghoul because I was seeing screen caps of the manga on my Instagram feed, saw how pretty they were, and I kept hearing good things, so obviously I wanted to read it. My original plan for this video was to just talk about the art, because I had my run-in with the anime years back and stopped before I even finished the first season, not only because the anime is just bad, but I also thought it was just one of those edgy to be edgy kind of series. However, very quickly during my read-through, I realized much more than the art was beautiful. Tokyo Ghoul is a story written and drawn by mangaka Shuei Ishida, and its story is split into two parts, Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Re. It follows Ken Kaneki, a normal guy who lives in a world with ghouls. Ghouls act just like people, but can only eat human flesh and coffee, and have magic stabby tails to murder people. Sadly, when he tries to get some poo-tang, there's an accident that totally wasn't caused by anyone in particular, and Kaneki gets some of her juicy organs, and he himself turns into a ghoul. Now, I'm just gonna be outright. This manga was fucking incredible. It's an easy 9 out of 10 and might edge to a 10 out of 10. I really did not expect that either, but the writing is so tight and its visuals are stunning, along with some amazing themes. It's honestly hard to give it anything less. I love the way the story was structured and how it flows. I think the name change halfway through to Re really fits, not only narratively, for everything feels flipped in that second half, but also just structurally. And, of course, me being the shonen junkie that I am, the fights are important to me, and I can confidently say those almost always perfectly hit the mark. They consistently had perfect build-up with good motivations and characters behind them, and no fights happened without a real purpose to it. The choreography was extremely well put together also. And the story, well, sheesh, it's fucking incredible. All of Tokyo Ghoul had me wanting more, and it kept continuously adding to itself to keep me invested. By the end of the first series, I was incredibly invested in all these characters, and Kaneki specifically. Which is why when he fucking died, and the tone, perspective, characters, everything just got flipped on its head at the beginning of Re, I was completely thrown out of whack. The first few chapters were incredibly interesting, but it kind of lost my interest as I was reading more to read rather than that constant desire to turn the page I had beforehand. But once I read chapter 31, I fell hard back into it again. A combination of the Takizawa plotline, little Kaneki interacting with Hayase, as well as the action, it all came together and that thirst was back in full swing. I can definitively say Re is better than Ghoul in almost every way, and is the better half. The story flows easier, it's better visually, the characters are incredible, everything just fucking works. The series touches on so much and has so many strengths in its deep moral themes and take on mental issues and traumas and overall message. My word is not enough to justify why I love this so much. So if you're looking for something to read, please go read this now. Because the rest of this video is to go in depth on why I love it so much, and context is definitely needed, because I'm not giving it to you, otherwise we'll be here forever. Obviously, my original main point in making this video was to talk about the artwork. And for the first half of Tokyo Ghoul, the art wasn't really half bad, but nothing to scream at. But slowly, as Ishida got more and more practice, it crescendoed into something stunning. The first time I really noticed this was chapter 63, with this panel. Combined with what the story was building up to at this point, turning the page to this was absolutely phenomenal. It only got better from here. The rest of Tokyo Ghoul was filled with phenomenal examples of letting the artwork speak for the story, using full use of the medium, as well as incredibly detailed backgrounds and environments to really get you invested in the world. And this shit was fucking weekly. This shit! One of my favorite examples is when Sato, a character I personally love, was told to write a will right before an operation just in case anything happened. This is pretty standard practice in a job as dangerous as this, and we get a chapter of him talking with his family and dreading leaving them behind. But he finally gains the confidence to write it, and then you just see this. It was fucking amazing. It made me feel for him, even though technically he was an enemy, but if anything, that just adds to the whole theme of there is no good and evil in this. Overall, the art gets infinitely better in Re, and there are legitimately too many fucking examples to point out every single one, so I'd rather showcase how he uses his art, and later on, throughout the video, give you some examples. Ishida is a master of showing emotion on characters' faces. You can vividly see the anger, or the sadness, or the insanity, or the dread, or the hope coming off the characters in their expressions. The manga expresses mental struggle in some incredible ways. Like this one shot of Mitsuki feeling anxious about men staring at them, and it just exudes that feeling so well. It really makes you feel for him. Obviously, there's dozens of times they show it off with Kaneki, either during his mental struggle with Hayase, while being tortured, etc, etc. I also love the action, again, like I mentioned earlier. Sometimes it can be hard to follow, solely due to how fucking intricately crafted it is, but every battle has a flair about it that I can't quite put my finger on. So before we get started on this topic, I want to link you guys to a video that does a really good job of explaining Kaneki's hair and how it represents his progression, so I don't really have to reiterate any of that stuff. Plus, you know, we love to support other creators. Ken Kaneki is a normal college student. He's got one friend, Hide, and that's all he needs. He reads a lot, and he's the quiet type. He's not the kind of guy you'd think would be the hero of a story, but his story is a tragedy. Throughout the first half of Tokyo Ghoul, Kaneki struggles with his situation of only being able to consume human flesh. He's a human for God's sake, and has been for the past 20 years. Over time, he finds ways to cope and not have to kill anyone, and even finds friends. However, he is a human. He pushes away any notion of being a ghoul, but his new life is surrounded by ghouls he cares about very deeply. Until he's tortured by Yamori. After endless rounds of being tortured, limbs and fingers cut off and grown back, only to be cut off again, a centipede put in his fucking ear, constantly being egged on mentally, he lost himself. He gave up. Until he saw his mother and he talked to Rise, the very ghoul that turned his perfect life upside down. And he accepted it. He accepted that he was now a ghoul. Through this, he had changed. He was still his normal and kind self that wants to protect his friends, but now he would kill anyone who threatened them without hesitation. Sometimes very aggressively, and in a very psychopathic way. And he continues like this for the rest of the story. Like in the final arc, the 20th Ward Raid, these two pictures are only a few chapters apart, of him, one talking to his friends, and the other talking to Amon, who is not only someone he respects but even likes, but is in his way to get to Mr. Yoshimura. I got severely attached to Kaneki in the later parts due to his ruthlessness, not necessarily because I like that, but because you can see all the exact steps that turned him from this to this. However, things wouldn't last. After his fight with Amon, Kaneki was severely injured, and he was about to run into Arima, the strongest investigator. And Hide came out to save Kaneki by asking him to eat him to give him strength. And even with this sacrifice, when Kaneki arrived, he lost. With ease. I love the relationship between Hide and Kaneki, and this was a fucking gut punch, as Arima absolutely bodied Kaneki and stabbed him through both of his eyes, straight through the brain. So we open Re with Hayase Sasaki being our main character. It's very clearly Kaneki who lost his memory, and Ishida doesn't try to hide this. Hayase acts very similarly to how Kaneki originally did, but much more confident and sociable. I'd say it was endgame Kaneki without the trauma. I got hooked on Hayase immediately, and he was what kept me going through the first bit of Re. However, over time, as he interacted with people from his past, the Kaneki in his mind became more and more prevalent. I loved this dynamic that was created where the young Kaneki didn't want to be forgotten and die, so Hayase started to search for his memories so Kaneki wouldn't die, but was almost completely flipped to where Hayase didn't want to lose himself if Kaneki ever came back. In chapter 53, in an absolutely stunning example of visual storytelling, everything came to a head where the two talked and agreed what they needed to do, and Kaneki's memories came flooding back as he took the head, but he was a jumbled mess, leaving him cold and heartless, and all he knew was that he needed to fix what he had done and save Hinami. By the way, Black Reader Kaneki is so fucking cool! Things went on with Kaneki like this for a while, where we mainly focused on other characters, up until the third Coachella raid. Kaneki, in order for all of his friends to escape, he stayed behind to fight Arima one last time. His entire plan was to buy enough time for everybody to escape and to just die a hero. That's what Hayase and himself agreed to. He wants to die a hero just like Hide did 2 years prior for his sake. But this ends up one of the most influential events in Kaneki's progression. In one of the most beautiful scenes in the manga, he finally realized that he does have a reason to keep on living. This isn't the end of his journey, not even close. And finally, after all these years, instead of living just for the sake of living, he found out what it means to live. This series of panels, specifically this one, oh man, I can't put into words how this makes me feel. This fight and Arima's eventual death, all this combined, made this probably one of my favorite moments in all of Re. The last half of Re Kaneki is my personal favorite. He is truly the combination of everything he's been through in all its glory. He acts as a true leader for the ghouls and has real plans to change the world for the better, for peace. He fights for his friends and soon-to-be family, as well as for what he believes is right. It's funny, for at this part of the story, he had never felt more human, when he was probably the most inhuman with his crazy fucking ghoul abilities and non-standard circumstances. There's 2 more pushes of development at this point in the story, both of which show that despite everything, he is still indeed a human being. The first being when he lost to Suzuya, and failed to protect everyone. In a beautifully crafted way, his inner thoughts fought each other, and he severely struggled with literal death. He was on death's door, his wife and friends were all about to be murdered, there was no hope. Which brought about the final conflict of the story being his monster Kagane form thing, where inside he deals with the fact that he has murdered a lot of people, and he can't change that. But eventually he accepts what he's done and decides to keep going, pushing, not to fix anything, but to finish what he started and atone. I loved how during his final battle with Furuta, he was calm and resolute. Nothing that was said stopped him, and he kept pushing forward. And finally, after the final battle, he accepts that after he started the story saying how unfair this world was, he realized the world is not wrong. It just is. Now, I've spent most of this video so far just talking about Kaneki, but the manga's real strength comes in its entire main cast and how they interact with Kaneki and his progression. I love almost all of the characters, and I could probably do videos on the entire main cast, but it's my video, so I'm just going to talk about a few of my favorites, because why not? Obviously, I love the entire Kaneki gang. My personal favorites are Tsukiyama and Nishiki, leaning a little heavier towards Tsukiyama as he just got more development and growth. I fucking love Amon. He was with the story from the beginning, and the relationship he and Kaneki have and how it grows is so intriguing and one of my personal favorites in the series. From when they first met on that street, to their showdown in the 20th Ward, to their conversation on the roof, finally getting to talk as equals. Obviously, him having that very strict to their ideals, fight for their friends kind of shonen main character attitude only puts him up in my book. I also love his relationship with Akira through and through, as well as with Sato and how that opened the doors for his own character arc. Besides that, my love for him mostly boils down to him being a complete fucking badass. Suzuki is one I would not have expected. I didn't necessarily like him for the majority of Tokyo Ghoul, but during the 20th Ward raid, when he lost Shinohara, and you saw how much he truly cared, I started to feel for him. But especially during Ri, I warmed up to his character to the point that when I saw him face off with Kaneki, I was almost torn because I'd seen them both build up to this point, and I knew they were both out for blood. Seeing his growth was incredible through and through. So, when Ri started, I fucking hated Yuri's guts. I thought he was the weakest of the Qs, especially compared to Shirazu. And it stayed that way. But slowly, very slowly, as the cracks began to show, I warmed up to him. And once Shirazu's death hit, he became one of my absolute favorite characters in the series, and definitively my favorite addition in Ri. His character growth isn't nearly as expansive as Kaneki's, but I feel it almost rivals it in solely how well it was handled. He's also a complete fucking badass, and he's probably my favorite male character, second to Kaneki, obviously. Now, there's two people that are more important to Kaneki than anyone else. And that would be Hide and Toka. Now to start, I love Toka so much for the fact that she is an incredible character without her relationship to Kaneki, which makes their eventual fall for each other that much better. She's without a doubt my favorite female character. Akira is a close second. Hide doesn't honestly get a lot of screen time, but his role in the story is second only to Kaneki in many, many ways. I loved his return in the end of Ri and how they handled the reveal, even though I already knew about it. His presence carries so much weight that when he showed back up, you could feel the entire story shift. I love these two so much for what they do, one for Kaneki, but two just as characters. Okay, the fact that this entire story happened because some motherfucker was horny for Rize is honestly the only reason I needed to say that this shit was beautiful. There's so many little things here that I find beautiful. A little thing like how fitting it was who pulled Kaneki out of the giant fucking fleshlight. Another is like how Kaneki, someone so lonely, solely through the great tragedy of him becoming a ghoul, finally found a true family as well as a woman to love. Now, Chapter 125. Listen, before I say anything, I want you to trust me on this one, okay? This chapter is definitely in my top 10 out of all 322 chapters. This is the chapter where Kaneki and Toka have sex. Listen, man, okay? No, it's fucking beautiful, okay? This chapter has almost no words and is literally 22 pages of them getting freaky. But it's beautiful, man. It's a culmination of hundreds of chapters of their relationship forming, of the hardship they had both been through. It's some quiet dropout college kid and a girl who keeps to herself. Neither of them really know what they're doing. However, Toka was kind of taking the lead there, no lie. I see you, Toka, I see you. This is the closest you can be with another person. The most intimate act of all, and they share that together. There's no real fan service in the chapter, thank God, because that wasn't the point. The point is that in the middle of this bloody, action-packed, depressing story, there's a single chapter with barely any words, where two people who love each other share this beautiful, life-giving moment. And I'm not gonna lie, when I turned to that last page, I almost cried. My final point here is to say that this is not a tragedy. Kaneki says this in chapter 1. And throughout the story, it gets repeated that his story is a tragedy. He's repeatedly beaten down. He doesn't always win. He loses a lot of people along the way. But that doesn't make this a tragedy. For in the end, he found his purpose. He found his reason in life. He found people to love. This story is in no way a tragedy. In my eyes, this story is beautiful. One that takes on much more intense and heavy themes, and one that shows the beauty in life, even if it's few and far between in the midst of the blood and tears. This manga has a lot to say on the will to live and coming to terms with oneself, and that's a message I will never get tired of, because it really is important to know. You have a purpose. You have a reason to keep fighting, even if you haven't found it yet. But when you do, it will make all of that hardship worth it.